The thing that I have an issue with when it comes to what I've seen of Dune Prophecy is that it looks so small. They clearly wanted it to look similar to Denis Villeneuve's cinematic adaptation, his two-film adaptation of Dune. Already that kind of feels strange, or a strange idea, because this is 10,000 years before Paul Atreides is on the scene, before the events of Dune take place. I think we would expect some differences in aesthetic, and I was hoping maybe for more an ostentatious feel for this older period of time, or for like 10,000 years ago, and also to kind of differentiate it. It's kind of odd to me, and I think for a lot of fans, that it looks so similar, even though it's like 10,000 years before, like separating these two events. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed, but it also looks so much smaller when you compare the epic scale of Dune and the scenes in it. It's definitely a stark difference to me. The throne room in the trailer just looks so small. They just look like they're talking in very small rooms. So I think people are more excited to see some more expansive and more of the strange elements of the show. I really hope they dive into other factions of this universe, in particular the Spacing Guild. You know, we've already seen a very Bene Gesserit focused adaptation of Dune, but it's essential to have all of these other factions at play. Honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like Denis' approach in wanting to really focus on the Bene Gesserit, ultimately I think it diminished them to a degree, because you can't really portray them as the puppet masters of the universe without the puppets to manipulate, without all of the pieces on the chessboard in play. I mean, that's when their power of manipulation and subterfuge is really seen, when you see their influence in these other institutions and factions. Hopefully we'll get more of the Mentats and, Spacing Guild, and just lore that wasn't focused on before. I do think fans were disappointed that this wasn't set around the Machine Crusade, around the Butlerian Jihad. Honestly, I think that would have been the better era to focus on. If you're at this point in time, I do agree that that would have probably been more appealing for fans. And I think also too, because this is the foundational event of Frank Herbert's Dune saga, of why all of the institutions and all the factions in Dune operate the way they do, is because of what happened in that galaxy-changing event, universe-changing event. I do agree with some fans that probably would have been the most epic story. There would have been more action, obviously, and I feel like if it's just going to be about the Bene Gesserit, there's definitely going to be way more talking, less action, just political intrigue stuff. And if it's done well, then that can be intriguing too. But I think a spin-off should also aim to expand and enrich, and if they're just going to retread on what we've already seen in the Dune films, then I don't know. I'm hopeful, but I'm not holding my breath in regards to this. And also my expectations are that Frank Herbert didn't write this particular story, so that's where I'm setting my expectation. Not a fan of them focusing on who has traditionally been the baddies. What I was saying too earlier about having protagonists to root for, having these likable characters. And I feel like we're gonna have that to a degree. But yeah, all the marketing so far has just really focused on the Bene Gesserit and the Harkonnen sisters here. We haven't even seen much of Travis Fimmel. He's in the show, and he kind of seems like he's going to be like a Duncan Idaho-esque character. But I don't think we've seen any footage from him. So it's very much, the marketing is very heavy on the Bene Gesserit, and I feel like it would do them good to just broaden, if there's something there to expand upon. There's obviously other characters, there's Atreides characters and these new ones, and there's a lot of original characters too, but I feel like they would benefit from that wider marketing appeal. There's so much of the show we haven't seen, and so much of the cast we haven't seen. We've seen the Imperial family, Mark Strong's the Emperor, the royal household, I guess, but in the Bene Gesserit, basically. And we've only seen glimpses of other characters, but I can't remember if we've actually seen Travis Fimmel, but he was on the Vikings show, and I think people are excited for his inclusion in this series, but we haven't really seen much of that. I want to see more of the Spacing Guild, Ixians, and Tleilaxu. I think we're all on the same page in that regard, that again, because they focused so much on the Bene Gesserit in the two films, Dune Part 1 actually put more information about the other factions, but they really greatly diminished and omitted entirely the involvement of these other factions for Dune Part 2. And I think that led to a lot of fan disappointment in that regard. So I do feel that if you're going to have a spin-off series, that should really capitalize on these other elements, that should expand the universe in a very meaningful way. And I think that would be a really good way to do that. But we'll see. I mean, it's called Dune Prophecy, and we've seen the log lines. So again, it's clear that that's going to be a significant focus, is the Reverend Mothers or the Bene Gesserit, but hopefully we'll also get the other factions represented as well. It'd be great if we could see a navigator, but guild members at least, and their hierarchy and their influence, I think. But yeah, hopefully Dune Messiah will be, I guess, our last best shot at seeing a Villeneuve's navigator. But I don't know, they're only basing it off of this universe too. It's inspired by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson's books. It's not a direct adaptation. So who knows? At the end of the day, who knows what they're going to do in terms of the story? You would think things would look a lot different after so many years. Exactly. And I was thinking too, like, trying to compare it. When you look at Star Wars and you look at the original trilogy, in comparison to the prequel trilogy, there is a stark difference. And I like that the eras are clearly separate and defined in how they look. And it also shows how the galaxy is different too. It does make sense because a cataclysmic event happened in Revenge of the Sith with the rise of the Galactic Empire. So they paved the way for why things look as they do, why everything operates as they do in the original trilogy of movies. And so yeah, we have an even greater. That was only a separation of a few decades between prequel trilogy and original trilogy, but we have 10,000 years over that between this show and the film. So it's a bit strange, but they clearly wanted it to look like the films, I guess, to capitalize on that. But even still, I'm comparing it. You want me to compare it, and I'm comparing it, and it's very small to the absolutely epic scale of those films. And what we've seen is just a bunch of people in rooms, smaller rooms, and definitely not near the degree. And I don't know if they could. Maybe their budget doesn't, they can only do so much with their limited budget. But if you wanted it to look like this style, it's even more so distinct, or it just stands out more as being not the same as Villeneuve's films. I don't know. So I think it's a double-edged sword in that regard. Without the Spacing Guild, none of it makes sense. You can get away with diminishing the Mentats, God forbid, but the Guild is indispensable. Yeah, you need that 3-point civilization represented. And the Bene Gesserit aren't even part of the tripod civilization. They're a secret point. But yeah, it's the Emperor, the Landsrat, and the Spacing Guild. Those are the 3 tiers that this society is based off of, or all civilization and commerce operate. So as we get closer, we'll see more details and hopefully more footage of the other elements of this show, hopefully. And hopefully if it does well, if season 1 does well, maybe they'll continue to expand and look at these other elements. I mean, I think Sisterhood of Dune, which is what this is inspired by, is part of a trilogy of books that go into all the different factions, the Mentats of Dune and Navigators of Dune. So it's part of that trilogy of novels. Because of that, it does kind of lend itself to exploring the other factions. This is the foundation of the Dune universe as we see it by the time of Frank Herbert's novel. So